Musical Talk, the UK independent musical theatre podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Musical Talk. This is Mike Shapiro. The pitter-patter you may faintly hear in the background of this recording is rain, which does occasionally happen here in Los Angeles, popular belief notwithstanding. Speaking of Los Angeles, this episode is all about a major LA cultural tradition, the Hollywood Fringe Festival. Every June, Hollywood's Theater Row and surrounding areas come alive with the bustle of hundreds of independent theatrical productions, ranging from single-person shows to professional productions of well-known plays and musicals. Most of this takes place in a collection of venues on Santa Monica Boulevard, a street that famously limits the amount of fun that singer-songwriter Sheryl Crow is willing to have. Longtime listeners to this podcast are doubtless familiar with the Edinburgh Fringe, the grandparent of all festivals that bear the Fringe name. Musical Talk does extensive coverage of Edinburgh every year. In fact, my own tradition of yearly trips to the festival began because I was so intrigued by the show's coverage. Edinburgh is not only the original Fringe, but a template for many other festivals worldwide, the Hollywood Fringe being one of them. It's worth noting that here in LA, we say Fringe Festival, whereas Edinburgh still uses the term Festival Fringe. Now, this isn't because the UK is quaint and old-timey, but rather because the word festival, in Edinburgh's case, technically refers to another festival entirely, the Edinburgh Festival, around whose fringe the festival we know and love originally emerged. Like so many other linguistic subtleties, this distinction did not survive its trip across the Atlantic, and in LA, if you say Festival Fringe, someone will look at you funny. End of side note. I'm going to explore the Hollywood Fringe through 3 interviews across 2 episodes. We start with an interview with Ben Hill, one of the founders of the Hollywood Fringe and the festival's director. We proceed to chat with director Janet Miller, who brings to Fringe high-quality productions of existing Broadway and off-Broadway musicals. We then talk with Laura Wiley, a from-the-trenches entrepreneur who writes and produces original musicals with pop-cultural themes. So sit back, make yourself exceedingly comfortable, because this episode is long, and enjoy this glimpse of one of Hollywood's less famous but very compelling cultural traditions. We'll start with our chat with Ben Hill, who is one of the original founders of the Hollywood Fringe. Ben, thanks so much for joining me on the show today.
Well, I am very happy to be here. Thank you.
Cool. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your background, both in the theater and more generally.
Oh, sure. I am one of those rare folks that came up through the theater, mainly through performance, which is what I studied as a youth. But I also had a significant background in technology and software development. And I think what I liked about the challenge of creating a Fringe festival, at least in the early stages, was the opportunity to create a vast technology framework to sort of ease folks through the process, to provide out-of-towners with a window into a given festival through websites and apps and the like. But yes, I've been involved in the theater since before I could remember. I was actually, some of my earliest memories were being in my parents' living room with a few of my sometimes willing, sometimes unwilling friends, putting together not theater performances per se, but little mini festivals in my parents' living room, where I would come in and introduce the slate of programming to my parents and sometimes their friends, and then bringing my friends in to perform little bits and skits and songs and whatnot.
You're a presenter from a very young age.
Yeah, even before I knew what the word was, I suppose I was a presenter from an early age. So yes, and then I was in plays. I've been in several musicals. I wouldn't say I'm at all a triple threat. I was more of an actor singer guy. Could never get the dance part down very well. But I lived in London for a long time, where I went to the Edinburgh Fringe, enough to have it obviously impact my worldview. And I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, imbued with all of the politics there, as well as its burgeoning theater scene. I lived in the Midwest for a while, and then I moved out to Los Angeles to seek fame and fortune, as many do. And as many do, when I arrived in Los Angeles, I decided I didn't want to act there in the slightest. And bizarrely decided to do theater there and to pursue the theater. And when I was there, when I arrived, 2006, I was floored by the amount of great theater that's in Los Angeles. I think at the time when I arrived, there are upwards of 800 theater companies. And, despite some of the reputation Los Angeles has had in the past, which in the past might have been earned before I arrived there, but the people that I met when I arrived in Los Angeles were doing theater not for fame and fortune in the quote-unquote industry of movies and television. They were doing theater because they loved theater and they wanted to produce, act, and design in great theater. And I saw this sort of disparate communities throughout Los Angeles, as did the co-founders that helped me start this, and we all worked together. And we felt that the theater in Los Angeles needed, which it didn't have, was some form of time and, more importantly, place for theater during the year. And having come from Washington, D.C., which has a fantastic fringe festival, and having been to the Edinburgh Festival Fringe many a time, and just in complete wonder and awe of what happens there in August, we decided to start a fringe festival there in Los Angeles, and that's when it all began, right there.
I'm going to assume, since you pretty much said this, that the Edinburgh Fringe was in some way a role model or inspiration for what you wanted to do here in LA.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, when we started planning, we spent 2.5 years contemplating, designing, and modeling the Fringe, as well as doing all the things you need to do, like building the municipal relationships and the venue relationships and the artistic relationships. But in Edinburgh, I remember it was the second year of our planning, well, let's say near the end of the first year of our planning, and we were seeking a model. And obviously, in the international fringe circuit, there are multiple different models for fringes, and wonderful fringes all use different models, and I'm completely non-judgmental on any model a particular fringe wants to use. We were trying to find the one that would work specifically in our market in Los Angeles, and we considered the array of different fringe festival models, including the lottery model, the first come first served model. We even briefly talked about the curated model that New York used to have. Early dismissed that, feeling it was not really what Los Angeles needed. And then we went back to Edinburgh Fringe, and I'd been there plenty of times before that, but not with an eye to create a fringe festival here in Los Angeles, obviously. So looking around and seeing how it worked, more on a molecular level, and talking to the administrators there, and talking to the artists there in a few venues, and everyone was wonderful and shared their thoughts and feelings. And we came back and kind of had this eureka moment that it's fundamentally, we want to borrow major parts of the Edinburgh model. And I think the part that really worked for us was this whole concept of the independent venue. And I know that the independent venue has had a few problems from a financial perspective in the Edinburgh model. With us, not so much, because we introduced an interesting little market controller in the beginning. We do utilize the Edinburgh model in that there's the Central Fringe organization. That's me and my confreres. Then you have the independent venues. Then you have the participant books at a venue, and then registers with a fringe. And this workflow is is helped along through our technology infrastructure. In the early days, we were fearful that venues might overcharge our participants, that there would be an economy problem there. So what we did was we created a Fringe Central venue, which was a Fringe run venue. And it was pretty large in our early days. It was kind of a market maker. We considered it a quote unquote public option, to borrow a term from United States politics in the world of healthcare, that basically set prices in a certain direction. So if one venue was going to be charging, say, something outrageous like $800 a performance, they could always come back and get what we felt was a fair value at Fringe Central. And in the early days, as the Fringe economy here in Los Angeles and Hollywood was being developed, the prices started to stabilize. And after several years, we realized, well, we don't even need to run a Fringe Central venue anymore in as far as the performance space goes. And the economy stayed stable because there has sort of been more knowledge of how all this works, and it's imprinted on the festival itself. So in a sense, it's very much like Edinburgh, but we added a few tweaks to make it a little more artist friendly for folks, especially coming from out of town.
Now, when you say artist friendly, do you mean in terms of the support they're given from the Fringe staff?
Well, certainly, and I don't want to cast judgment at all on the Edinburgh Society's support, because they obviously do a fantastic job. I'm speaking specifically from a pricing perspective. It was our goal from the outset to enable artists to present or produce a show in Hollywood, which is a pretty expensive market, at a fraction of the cost, and at a massive advantage to the marketing and the visibility perspective than throughout the rest of the year. Like, for example, if I wanted to produce a musical, an original musical, let's say with some musicians, ensemble cast, 5 to 15 or something like that, in Los Angeles, in a place like Hollywood, at a nice theater. Talking to producers who've done this in the past, leading up to our Fringe planning, they might spend $80,000, $100,000, $120,000 for a 6 to 8 week run. It can be incredibly expensive. What we did, and anyone who's done Fringe festivals in the past understands this, is by allowing these venues, who normally would only book 6 to 8 weeks at a time, and you would basically run the space on given nights or 5 to 7 days a week, what have you. We provided the venues with an option to break up into slots. And as a result, it's a win-win all around, right? Because the venues ultimately, from their business perspective, and we very much want the venues to stay in business, obviously, and have successful businesses. But from a business perspective, they were able to offer rents at a substantially reduced price by breaking it up into segments. And at the same time, the artists and the producers were able to benefit from that by being able to produce in an otherwise expensive market at a fraction of the rate. And as a result, you also have this massive publicity that follows the Fringe. Basically, all of the theater press descends on the Fringe during June, so you can have the win-win-win of running a show in an expensive market at a fraction of the rate, at a substantial with a substantial marketing environment surrounding it, giving you significantly more visibility in a town where it's frankly hard to rise from the pack. So that's the model we put together. Ultimately, from a rent and registration perspective, our goal was to allow a producer from anywhere to produce a show from a registration and rent perspective around $1,000 for 4 to 5 performances. And that was always the goal. So that worst, they can break even. At best, they make some money and can invest in their future plans.
Now let's talk a little bit about the Hollywood Fringe culturally. Since you're a veteran of Edinburgh, so you have a sense of what the mood is like there and the audience demographics. How would you compare Hollywood and Edinburgh just in terms of the culture of the participants and also the audience?
That's a really good question. When I go to Edinburgh, I have a blast because you can go to all of the various venues. The venues have their unique cultures. There are generally bars in each of the venues, and I like to go into the individual bars and meet the artists. They're sort of clustered around those venues. But Edinburgh is it's a product of its own success. It's a giant festival. It's funny. Never in my wildest dreams that I think that I would, with others, create a 400 show festival and then go to a different city and be in complete awe and wonder at how small it is. so I mean, the culturally, the difference with Hollywood Fringe, and this is something that goes well beyond finances and goes well beyond even mission. It's all about the community. It's all about creating a pocket in Los Angeles culture, which, let's face it, in the industry where there's lots of money involved, can be particularly cutthroat, can be full of one-upsmanship, full of appearance-based politics and whatnot. We've created a community in Hollywood that's based around generosity, kindness, creativity, imagination. We have one rule in the Hollywood Fringe. What's nice about running a Fringe festival, Michael, right, is you don't have to deal with saying no too much, which is actually really nice for me. But we have one rule. And at the first town hall of the year, I always give this speech. The one rule we have is simply don't be a jerk. If you don't be a jerk, then you're not going to have a problem. And it's funny, that's so ingrained. If every event I go to, if I say, and what's the one rule of Fringe? People will chant, don't be a jerk. It's built in to the culture of the festival. And as a result, people, that's where you meet people that you ultimately might partner with on future artistic endeavors. So many relationships, professional and personal, and sometimes marital, I know several examples of that, have begun in the context of working together in the Hollywood Fringe Festival. Companies have been formed through these relationships. Great endeavors have been created. And I think it all comes down to this concept of community. In a festival the size of Edinburgh, it's hard to have a unified community. And even as we push, a couple thousand artists involved in the Hollywood Fringe, there are challenges in that. But I think if there's one area where we've been particularly successful, it's been in creating this supportive culture. And that's the thing that, after everything is said and done, the shows and the performances and the plaudits and the noise and the parties and everything is done, what Hollywood Fringe is at its core is a supportive community of artists. And that's what I'm most proud of.
Now, continuing along the thread of helping characterize Hollywood Fringe in contrast to Edinburgh, if we think of Edinburgh, it's this big quarter of the city, which is all transformed into a giant arts festival. Can you describe just the geographical layout of Hollywood Fringe and maybe what some of the venues tend to be like?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think when I was not a Los Angelino, before that, I had heard of the various landmarks, the roads, Sunset Boulevard, Hollywood Boulevard, and in the Capitol Records building and whatnot, the Hollywood sign, the icons of Hollywood that make up Hollywood. Hollywood Fringe takes place in approximately a 1 square mile within what's commonly known as Hollywood. Hollywood isn't a municipality. It isn't a city. It's more of a neighborhood within the city of Los Angeles. Hollywood is quirky. Hollywood is definitely a unique place on the earth, without a doubt, because it has the legends of all of those icons that have walked there in the past and created there in the past. There's a section of Hollywood called Theater Row. And this is when my wife, Stacy, and I, who was the co-founder of the Fringe as well, initially arrived in Los Angeles, and we're walking the earth, deciding what exactly we wanted to do there. We were living right next to Theater Row, which is roughly on a street called Santa Monica Boulevard in Hollywood. And walking through, we just saw theater. And we went into these theaters. They weren't giant, 500-seat, 1,000-seat theaters that in the intimate community of the theatrical world wouldn't really be considered usable from a Fringe perspective. But what they were theaters ranging from 40 to 99 seats. The reasoning why is because of union regulations here, and that's a much different subject we probably don't want to get into.
Its own show.
That's its own couple of shows, yes. But as a result of these union regulations, you have these fantastic intimate spaces. Now, one of the great things about Fringe is this whole concept of freedom of failure. Not something I would say to the general press, but something I would say to artists who are interested in participating in the Fringe. There's a freedom to fail. You're not going to lose your shirt, completely bankrupt yourself. And by having these smaller theaters where you can, if this is your goal with Fringe, test drive new work, do something experimental, modify an existing work to try something new and see if it works. These small theaters, therefore, leading to smaller budgets and fuller feeling houses, provide great opportunities. So I know there are other Fringes in the United States and Canada that don't have these blessings. They don't have these small, fully equipped theaters like we do in Hollywood. They might be in gyms or coffee shops and on. But in our case, we have these, which is really fantastic.
And one thing you've touched upon, and again, in contrast to Edinburgh, is that we are much more compact just in terms of the size of the festival. So whereas anyone who's been to Edinburgh knows you're typically madly running across the city, kind of keeping an eye on where you need to be. And can I elbow my way through the crowds here to get to see venues? And where's that building? And you're making this mad dash. And there can be a little bit of that here in Hollywood as well. But by and large, you don't have that fear that you are physically too far away from your next show, if you're seeing 3 or 4 a day, to actually get there. There's a kind of relaxation, at least I find, when I'm attending shows.
Absolutely. We have a saying when we get asked the question, how do you Fringe in Hollywood? And what I say is yeah, sure, pick the shows that you want to see. Look through the guide, talk to people, create some anchors. I definitely need to see this show and this show and this show. But because things are relatively compact geographically, we say, go with what's near, what's next, challenge yourself. The average cost in Hollywood range around $12 a ticket. And the show lengths anywhere between 45 minutes and 90 minutes, probably like pulling back it's about 60 minutes is the average. So you have location, what's near, you have time, which is, pretty compact. Usually worst case scenario, you have that hour of a time you saw some show you didn't like. And worst case scenario, you're out $8 to $12 to see a show. So you have the ability to experience and you have the ability to experiment and challenge yourself. Because for me, it's all about finding that show in the early part of Fringe that's the sleeper that nobody knows about because they're just some guys from nowhere. They haven't done. They're not from a big company. They haven't done Fringe for 8 years in a row. Nobody knows who they are, but they've got something based on their life experience or something. They've got something special that moves you and that you really connect with, and that's what I'm looking for. And what's great about Hollywood Fringe is that these shows, because we have such an active community, a central community, and people talk and communicate and connect, that these shows don't stay hidden. Ultimately, that show that you're alone and you see 5 other people or something with in the house, And you're going, oh my God, how is it people don't know about this show? This is brilliant. You go 3 performances later and it's packed and there are people angry they can't get in. I mean, and then there's talk that they need to add performances and all of this. So that happens. This sort of magic happens where the great stuff really does float up.
It strikes me that another advantage to the relatively compact size of the Hollywood Fringe is that Fringe Central, which you mentioned earlier, can serve as a kind of central meeting point or nexus both for people bringing material to the Fringe as well as visitors.
For sure. I mean, with something as vast and giant and brilliant as Edinburgh Fringe, it's again hard to have that central location. It's hard to have those few watering holes where you can see all of the big players of the Fringe and the people that are really attached to the festival hang out. And what's nice about this is that, unlike I would say most of Los Angeles, I mean, you go into Chateau Marmont and West Hollywood, which is particularly you've seen it in shows and films, no doubt, but it's and maybe not knowing it, but it's this basically castle in West Hollywood where some of the Hollywood elite hang out and drink. And you walk in there, and if you're off the street, you're nobody, and they're generally going to be ignored and not talked to and shunned. And that's just sort of Los Angeles in some respects, in some parts of Los Angeles in the industry. But Hollywood Fringe is much different. It's very open and caring, and people are very generous with their time. So if someone comes in from out of town and says like, I don't really know what I'm doing, I don't know where I should go, I don't know how to promote my show, there isn't a reaction from the community that's like, oh, this is competition, I'm going to try to stymie this guy's ambitions or lead her astray or something like that. That there's a come in, I'll tell you what worked for me, I can help you. And they'll introduce you to people and the whole thing. There's that environment, which makes, for me, I get to go back into this year after year, and we're entering our 10th year right now. That's the most special. Is to see people being helped and to see this community opening its arms to newcomers.
And likewise, I imagine that the compact size of the Hollywood Fringe might make it a little more accessible to visitors, especially first-time visitors, in contrast to the vast and perhaps a little intimidating size of Edinburgh.
They'll tell me a story of how I'm stupid. The first time I showed up in Edinburgh, I just moved to London, and my girlfriend at the time wanted to take a trip up to Scotland and sort of make our way up there. And obviously Edinburgh was on the list, and we show up and we realize that we're having a real hard time finding any place to stay. This is, pre, kayak.com and whatnot, where you can just hotels.com where you can just pick something up. You're hitting the streets looking for places to stay and like, what is going on? And why are all these people here? What's the deal with all these flyers? And we're like, oh, it's Fringe now, isn't it? It was a bit overwhelming, right? We didn't know where to start and what, and we eventually learned and sort of unlocked some of the glory that's Edinburgh Fringe. But yeah, it's an easier on-ramp in Hollywood. You can come to wherever our centralized location is at any time, and we have people there that will help you along. And of course, Edinburgh does too. It's just a little easier to sort of attack it. I mean, again, 400 or so shows on average in the past few years. You'd think it were large, but even then, it's slightly more navigable than Edinburgh.
Now, turning to musical theater, which is obviously a interest point of the listeners of this podcast. In a given year, roughly how much of the content of Hollywood Fringe would you say is musical theater?
It's been growing, which is fantastic. As a musical fan, lifelong musical fan, I'm very happy to see that musicals have been growing. And musical, we have an award. We have an award ceremony at the end, as much as you can have an awards for an event like this. And the winner of the musical category is always one of the most very vaunted stations that you can achieve. But I would say approximately 20% are musicals. Most of those are original musicals. A good portion of them are world premiere musicals, making their first appearance at the Hollywood Fringe. Musicals are received very well, and theater people, so many theater people in Los Angeles, because even people in film and television tend to originally come from the theater. And so many theater people love musicals that you definitely have a built-in audience base from the Fringe community and from the greater Los Angeles community who are interested in new works, new musicals, things they haven't seen. So yeah, musicals are a big deal.
I'll make a broad, kind of hand-wavy generalization, and I'll invite you to either contradict it or support it, depending on your opinion.
Sure.
My impression is that because we're in the center of the entertainment industry, the musicals here at Hollywood Fringe tend to be a little more contemporary and perhaps pop culture inspired. Whereas I found in Edinburgh, you do get that kind of show, but there's also more of a focus on historically themed or historically based musicals.
I would say that's fair. I would absolutely say that's fair. I mean, there's a with any Fringe show in Hollywood, there's always that. There's sometimes that aspect of the pop culture of the bizarre and whatnot. You see, the ye old zombies creep up quite often and stuff like that, pulled from pop culture references. We do have shows and musicals that are based on previous works of art, including the cinema. That is something that definitely happens. And I suppose fun and sprightliness are some of the qualities of the musicals that come over here. You see there is that aspect of the quote unquote fringiness in the musicals, but that doesn't mean that people aren't interested in seeing darker stuff or stuff that's come from a more historical place. I think all of that's welcome at Fringe. But yeah, I would agree with your initial premise that you do tend to see more pop culture-y stuff.
Now that we're at the Hollywood Fringe's 10th anniversary, are there any trends you've observed over the past years, and where do you see the festival going in its future?
I like to pretend that I have some sort of influence in the direction that the Hollywood Fringe goes, but I really don't, do I? I mean, nobody does. I mean, ultimately, what is Fringe but kind of like an amazing pattern on the wall of what's happening in experimental theater at any given time. I mean, by the very nature of the open access qualities of Fringe, it's kind of if I was like a PhD in theater history, I would be fascinated in studying Fringe and how Fringe is sort of a leader of more broad cultural trends, or an indicator of cultural trends. I mean, obviously, there's been some interesting political events in the United States in the past few years. And we've definitely seen a rise in political theater in the Fringe in the past few years. We've seen a rise in feminist theater in the past few years. We've seen a big rise in immersive theater, which Los Angeles, I would say, is one of the leaders in the world in immersive theater, and it is our newest category and one of our most popular. Generally, the ones that sells out the fastest because they have the fewest amount of tickets available. So on the on sale date, I always have to keep my eye on the immersive shows to make sure that things are going well there, because you have people lining up at that second trying to snag up those tickets. And then you sort of look to see what's popular in the culture, in the local culture, the national culture, the international culture at any given time. You see it represented in Fringe. I think that's what's so glorious about it. Why I'm such a believer in this open access model as opposed to the curated model, because you're constantly surprised.
If you did have the magical ability to influence the future of the Fringe, would you like to see it grow in terms of size, or do you like the compact size it is now?
An interesting question. I mean, I always love choice. I love size. I think one of the great things about Fringe is the massive amount of choice that it provides you, and it allows both you as a patron of the arts to find the work of art that you connect with and inspires you, and as a practitioner of the arts allows you to find your audience and the people that would be interested in seeing what you'd be doing. If this is deeply, deeply selfish, but I had to wave my magic wand and say I'd like to see more exit Fringe. I mean, this might be at odds with a lot of your listeners, perhaps not. But I would like to see more family programming because I have a child now, which I didn't 10 years ago, and I would like to see more theater with her. So, yes.
Well, that's music to my ears in particular. If you imagine two listeners listening in on our conversation, and one of them is a potential Fringe participant, and the other one is just an audience member, someone who loves musical theater, where on the web can they go to learn more about Hollywood Fringe and perhaps plan their trip to LA?
Well, the easiest place, obviously, is our webpage, hollywoodfringe.org. Probably don't need to spell that for your audience. That's the easiest place to go. We have a very active and responsive, God bless them, support staff as well. That really, we get back to people very quickly with detailed answers and keep up the conversation. So I'd encourage anybody with any questions to check out our support portal at support.hollywoodfringe.org or email us at support@hollywoodfringe.org with any questions. We get it. Matthew, you can only imagine. Maybe that's something that folks on the participating or patronizing end don't think about is the amount of support requests that any large-scale international Fringe gets. It's massive, but we actually take some joy in providing excellent customer service to our community and the people that want to be a part of the community. So it's really no question is too dumb, too small, too large. If you are curious where to start as a participant, feel free to email us. If you are a patron and would like to know more about what the Fringe is, I'd say definitely start at support.hollywoodfringe.org. We give you some history. Edinburgh is obviously mentioned several times in the history of the Fringe movement, how the Fringe in Hollywood is unique in this, specific to its cultural, zone in its area, milieu, and then how to participate in some tips on how to create a robust and robust Fringe experience.
Well, Ben, it's been a real pleasure having you on the show and chatting and giving our listeners some perspective on what for them may be an exotic, distant land with its own independent theater scene. I'm a frequent flyer at the Fringe as an audience member, so I know I'll be looking forward to it this June. Thanks so much for joining me on the show.
And thank you so much. And thanks to all your listeners for everything they do every day to make the world a better place through theater and through Fringe. Thank you.
Pizzicato and flute in unison doubling, an orchestration much favored by the French Impressionists. We now move on to the second of our Hollywood Fringe Festival interviews, this being with Janet Miller, who is a director of many high-quality productions of off-Broadway and Broadway musicals, which she brings to the Hollywood Fringe for that audience. I first became aware of her work when she put on a production of a lesser-known Flaherty and Aaron show, A Man of No Importance. I thought this production was stellar, and years later I had the pleasure of talking to her. Interestingly, there is also a connection through Janet with another musical talk presenter through the byways of coincidence. To find out which and who, you'll have to listen on. Well, Janet, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you.
So I thought I would begin by introducing you or allowing you to introduce yourself to our listenership. Can you tell us a little bit about your background generally in theater and as a developer of musical theater?
I started out my early career as a dancer and a choreographer. And then I sort of launched into directing fairly early, probably in my late 20s, doing summer stock and teaching and what have you. And, one thing led to another. I did children's theater in La Mirada for 18 years. I was the artistic director of community type theater in Torrance for 7 years and did 16 shows there, did some big musicals. And sort of during all of that time, The Marvelous Wonderettes hit, and we had that wonderful experience for many years, about 11 years, making that happen, going off-Broadway and all over. And so then I opened my own company at some point and became a producer. So
Well, hang on, don't bury the lead here. Tell us about the Off-Broadway Experience.
Oh, well, that was thrilling. We started that show. Well, Roger had done a cabaret version of The Marvelous Wonderettes, and then they decided to give him an opportunity to do it in the middle-sized theater at the Milwaukee Rep. That's where it started. And when that happened, he asked me to create original choreography for that, and so we did. And then we had a process, as you do when you create any new musical, even though it is a jukebox musical, but still in all, there is a story that goes with it, and there's iconic girl group choreography, 50s and then 60s. There's 33 numbers. Took it off-Broadway, where it ran about 15 months, and was nominated for Lucille Lortel for that, which was astonishing and unexpected, and all those emotions in between. And, did the first European production in Italy.
Nice.
In Milan. So how fun was that?
So it sounded like your base of operations was initially here in Southern California, and then you began this whirlwind tour of going to New York and then Europe. And then I assume you came back here, and was that the point where you decided to start your own theater company?
Well, yeah. I had this show that was just sitting in my head, that I loved so much, A Man of No Importance. And there had been a beautiful production that had been done by the Musical Theater Guild. And I just really wanted to do it. And I had a particular POV in mind, and I really wanted that out in the world. And I know a lot of people were looking at, different companies were looking at doing it, and I thought, I could just miss my chance completely to do this beautiful musical that I would so love to do. So then it was like, let's just do it. So we did.
This was the first of your productions that I'd seen personally, and I think that was the 2015 or 16 Hollywood Fringe?
2013.
13, so quite a while back. But I'd not heard of that show prior to then, so I'm curious how you found it and what interested you in particular about that.
I love Roger Rees. So, quick Hollywood story. Back in the day when I was working at some job, doing theater at night, working some job, I met Roger Rees. And I had a sweatshirt on that said tap, and he said, "Can you teach me how to tap?" And I said, "Well, yes, I can." So I did. And what a dream, because I knew him when he walked in to this business, and I was like, "Nicholas Nickleby." And he said, "Nobody ever says that. Everybody always says Cheers," because that's when Cheers was happening. That's why he was here. And I'm like, "Oh, Nicholas Nickleby." And he was just so charming.
Did he appreciate being recognized for something that wasn't the most obvious thing?
He did.
Yeah.
He did. He just really was so surprised because nobody really did say that to him. And I was like, Anyway, we had some tap lessons. He came to a couple of my classes. I taught him some privates. Whatever, it was very fun. And then when I went to New York, which was quite a bit, I would go to New York and see shows and things, and I would go and see whatever he was in, which was also many shows and plays and Uncle Vanya and you name it, he was in it. And I would wait and talk to him afterwards, just say, hey, stuff like that. Anyway, and I didn't get to see A Man of No Importance. But
Dumb question, was he in the original production?
he was.
Okay, was he the lead?
He was.
Okay, so now it's all coming together for
Yeah,
me.
he was. And so I listened to that musical so many times. And of course, I knew it was based off on a movie. And anyway, I just was very taken by it, so that's how it all kind of came about. Sometimes you just love a show so much, you just put your money where your mouth is, and then you make it happen. There hadn't been a fully staged production yet. Music Theater Guild does beautiful, wonderful work, and their production was astounding. So I did want to do a little bit more, with the show, although I am a less is more type person. I thought, well, let's give it the full, staging and 5-week rehearsal and all that kind of thing. So a really wonderful friend of mine who runs Courage Theater Company, Jerry Elliott, said, you should do Fringe with that show. And I said, I'm doing it. I'll do it.
What in particular about the Fringe was appealing?
Built-in audience, built-in structure. You're guaranteed somebody to walk in the door, and that's, nobody's going to know us from Adam. We're going to do a show, and, I have done theater here for years and years, but still in all, butts and seats, it's not the easiest thing to do. And so it was all about the structure, having some sort of structure and not just coldly saying, okay, we're going to do a show and then we have to get a theater. Also, it is, cost effective. However, when I say that, I will say that we were using the Lillian, which is now...
the Broadwater, right?
Yeah, Broadwater. And David Fofi, who was running the Lillian at the time, and then Matt Quinn sort of was managing it. Also, my second year. The first year, David wasn't doing very many Fringe shows. And so we sort of had all the good times, and, we sort of bought out, 8 o'clock shows, which is really not what Fringe is all about, but that's what we did because we were doing a show that's 2.5 hours, and we can't really start at 11 o'clock at night. So right. I can't put an audience through that. I can't put, any of my actors and musicians and technicians. There's a lot of people who were walking in to the Lillian at the time to put on that show every night for 12. I forget, I get them confused sometimes. Anyway, somewhere between 12 and 14 performances we did. So we did a full run, but we just did it in Fringe. So we were helped by that structure and having it be a less for advertising and things like that.
One of the advantages of any of the Fringe festivals is discoverability of a show that might otherwise not come to somebody's attention. And here I'm referring to myself because I remember looking through the catalog, it's probably online rather than a physical one, and thinking, oh, I haven't heard of this Ahrens and Flaherty show. Mm-hmm. I might as well check it out. And I don't think I would have had the opportunity, I wouldn't have been aware that production was there without the shared promotional aegis of the Fringe. So there's certainly an advantage there where I was concerned. What I remember about that production, two things kind of strike me other than the material itself. One was that you had a live band, which, if I remember, was kind of an Irish folk ensemble. And is that was that an ensemble that's specified by the orchestration of the show?
Yeah. Yes. Well, that has that feel to it. But, we have the maestro Corey Hirsch, who is the most brilliant of all musical directors. And so, it is specified, but, he has magic. Well, let's just say. And he knows all musicians that are brilliant and right for, whatever project he needs. So that was how that we really wanted them to be seen and to be part. I always want the maestro Corey Hirsch, or any maestro for that matter, to be seen. It's sort of a thing with me because I love what they're contributing. I mean, how are you going to do a musical without what's going on with the music, you know? I mean, and but especially Corey, because we've worked together, you know, many years.
Another thing that struck me about this particular production was the quality, the amazing quality of the performers. I think with Fringe, there are some really good professional productions, but the variability of quality is very high. Was this a production, had you formed your theater company at this point, and was this a production of that company?
Well, it was like, we're going to do the show, and then my partner in theatrical crime, Kimberly Fox, said we should just open a theater company. I said, oh yeah, let's just do that. That's easy. No, I'm joking. So not easy. But we said, okay, let's just think about that then. So that's sort of how it kind of came about, the company. And so the company sort of came about at the same time A Man of No Importance came about. So it's sort of, you know, hand in hand in that way. I'd say half of the actors I knew and I had worked with, some numerous times, some maybe only one time. I had done recently or a year before, I'd done a production of Baby, and a couple of the performers came from that. And some of the performers literally I've known for 20 plus years. You know, Dominic, who played Alfie, was, you know, as you know the story because you actually met him, he was working in Mexico City, and I just thought that he might be exactly perfect. And so I said, let's do this thing. And so he was able to come and do it. And that was sort of a wondrous moment. There were a lot of wondrous moments putting that show together. And I had my people that I worked with, my stage manager, my costumers, and of course Corey, and my assistant stage manager. I mean, people I have worked with for years and years. And so it made sense to kind of gather them all up and say, okay, let's do this thing. And it had such a heart to it, you know. We all worked really hard, and we can't go much further without mentioning Jill Massey, who did the dialect coaching.
I was about to say, I remember the accents felt very authentic.
Yeah, worked super hard. It's very difficult, and she is wonderful. And so here we are, just putting this show together with these really wonderful, strong actors, and we then got new actors too from the auditions. It was really a piece of my heart there. The woman who played the sister, you know, that Shirley Hatton, she and I go back, I don't even know, 25 years. Done many, many productions together. Michael Wallet, also with Dominic. I met doing Summer Stock when they were 18.
Wow.
So that's 30-some years when we did that show.
For the benefit of our regular listeners, I want to point out that the Dominic in question is Musical Talk's very own Dominic McChesney. And I saw the production with him in the leading role, and I remember thinking how good he was while not having any idea who he was. And it wasn't years later until he and I became colleagues through this podcast where I slowly pieced together that I had seen him years prior, which was a crazy, crazy coincidence. So I've always been amused by that strange turn of events. But it is very flattering to think someone's good before you know who they are, because once you know someone, you kind of want to think that they're good. So I thought he was great with the raw objectivity of someone who I thought was a complete stranger. How did you, given that you decided to take advantage of the social environment and the shared community of Fringe, how did you find that you were received as production?
Well, it was a little, we're a little weird, because here we are, we have this book show, and we have this, it's not a new show, it's not a new piece, and it's 2.5 hours.
Super long for Fringe.
Super long, and so a huge commitment for the audience, and we're charging top dollar, which was, for Fringe, was like $20. And so with all that being said, we were an oddity, I think, but everyone was kind of like, hey, friendly and welcoming, and and we just sort of plowed ahead and sort of did what we're there to do. And Fringe is very fun and very open, I think, to pretty much anything anybody wants to do. And although we were on one end of a spectrum, certainly super rehearsed and, and like I said, book and the live music and all this stuff and the length. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have these brilliant productions that people do in Fringe that are short and they're kind of improv based, and they're, but they're hilarious when you go. A lot of times they're hilarious in a sense that they're more comedic than they are tragic, there's that wonderful energy in Fringe. We always felt very welcome in the Fringe community, and we did, 4 shows. I also did a couple other projects in Fringe. Did one as a choreographer and one as a director. That was not associated with Good People. And I just always felt that Fringe is a very comfortable place to be. I mean, it's crazy in a sense of fast. Even us, sometimes we would have a show that followed us, not a lot, or one that was before us that first year, because, we were 2.5 hours. So, but a couple times we did, and we just got our set put together and put it away and in with the next one.
Did you have the 15-minute in and out?
We did. We did when we had somebody following us. Now, after that, after Man of No Importance, there were more book musicals in Fringe.
The year after?
The year I did The Fantastics. So we thought, well, maybe that was a little bit because of A Man of No Importance. Maybe not. Maybe it was coincidence.
You might have shown that it was possible to do a production of that scope successfully.
Yeah. I hope so. But I hope people enjoyed it. It was. We just loved it so much. We had offers to move it and do things, but it's a huge production. I mean, it's ginormous, really, if you think about it, because there's 15 actors, and then there's 4 musicians, and I have my tech folk, and it's big. So we sort of decided, that would be that, although I'm open to do A Man of No Importance any place anybody ever wants to do it. And I always have in the back of my mind that doing it somewhere.
So anyone listening out there who wants to produce that show, we have a very qualified director. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about The Fantastics. Mm-hmm. What's interesting here is you're going from a fairly obscure show with a large cast to a perennial show. I think it's like the longest running off-Broadway musical.
Longest running a musical ever, I think, anywhere.
It's one of these surprising statistics, but it's extremely well known as an intimate cast, at least compared to
8.
A Man of No Importance. And because it's well known, I think that it's the expectations must be different. So what was it like going from one kind of show to another?
Well, if you think about the Fantastics, we sort of billed it as the original Fringe show because that's sort of how it started back in the day. And it was very fringy and very sort of ahead of its time. And so I don't re-envision the Fantastics at all. I like to present the Fantastics, which I hope that it is in the tone of the original Fantastics. They give you a director's notebook, some notes, and they tell you how things are built and what they did. And we didn't do every single thing like that, but we follow along in the world of tone. And I think it's really important. And so we think that the Fantastics has a place in Fringe because of its beginning, and because if no one's ever seen the Fantastics, it still feels fringy. If you do it the way that they suggest that you do it.
Do you mean kind of eccentric and very stylized?
Stylized, with very little sets and the funny actors coming out of the boxes, and you have El Gallo doing his thing, and you have the mute helping. And I mean, if you think about it, we're so used to it. To us, it's just, the Fantastics, it looks like this. But if you think about it and you sort of deconstruct it, it's a very strange thing. It's Boy Meets Girl and all that. So that's at the heart of it. But the way they go about it is very sort of different and eccentric. I mean, for us, it's old hat because you like the Fantastics. So I've done the Fantastics. It's sort of my go-to. Corey and I did it together back at the Torrance Theater Company, and we did it in a converted office space back in the day. I think that was 2004. And then Corey and I did it again in some other year, 2006 maybe, and we did it in a plaza in Manhattan Beach. And then we finally said, okay, we're going to do this in a theater with a harp, because we hadn't done it with a harp yet. And I had done another production way back in the day as a choreographer back in 1988. So I just do this. This is another show that this would be my signature show. If you have to have one show that's your signature show, I guess the Fantastics is mine. I also teach it when I teach script analysis, and we discuss it at length because it's an important piece of theater. And so you would be surprised at how many people say, oh, the Fantastics, I've never seen it. We heard that so much in the world of Fringe, and we were so happy we produced it. And we did very well with that. And again, it fit right, or we feel we fit right in. Do we fit right in? I don't know. Again, it's a full-length show, so it's 2 hours. We had less 8 o'clock shows, but we did have a lot of regular time shows, only because we had people, again, traveling from Orange County, and on a Friday night, you have to get to, they can't get there at 5 because they're working or whatever.
Right.
They just can't get there. So, but we were a little more fringy. And then when we did Marry Me a Little, we committed fully to the Fringe experience. We had to sort of inch our way towards it, so yeah, the Fantastics was great because we had some people too that it was new to them, a younger audience that did not know the Fantastics. So how happy does that make me?
And the show does have a strange timeless quality because it's not obviously set in any particular time.
Nope.
I tend to imagine it as being 19th century or earlier, but I remember either your production or another one, I thought, oh, this could easily be the 20th century, just kind of a rural environment. So it has a longevity, I think, because of the non-specificity of the setting.
Absolutely, and that's why people do all sorts of different things with it too. It's been changed, and I know people use mothers and do all sorts of wonderful things that works for them. What works for me is to really serve the text, and I'm all about, as I've mentioned, before here just now, about tone, and I like to try to do what the playwrights envision. I try anyway, and I don't know. I mean, I saw the Fantastics back in the day in New York. I can't say that I remember exactly the tone since it was so many years ago, but I think from listening to the music, also from doing it many times, and just from the hints that you're given, that you can put all those pieces together and create that. And again, we did hear from many audience members that it was tonally like New York.
I remember the harp. I remember thinking, wow, that's a real orchestral harp.
Absolutely.
Not a sitting around the campfire in the Celtic wilderness, lap harp. This was the real deal. And that's a really striking sight. Mm-hmm. But the theater generally, like Light in the Piazza is the last show I saw where I remember that there was a harp. But certainly a kind of smaller, more intimate theater to have a instrument that's bigger than the cast members is kind of a fun thing to see.
Yeah.
And if memory serves, correct me if this is just kind of a fever dream, but I seem to remember that you had the harp on stage right, and then maybe the rest of the group across the stage. Is that a correct memory?
I had the harp, we're in that, still the Lillian before Sacred Fools, so it's in that sort of diamond shape. So the harp was right, Corey was stage left, so they could sort of see each other across like that, and Corey as in the brilliant musical director, and then we had the setup in the middle, so that we had the playing area, and then the chairs where they sort of sit and watch the action when they take themselves out of the action, just around the back.
So you also did a show that I was unaware of, because the next one I remember seeing was Toxic Avenger. And what did you do between those?
We did Marry Me a Little.
Now, I don't really know that show very well.
Marry Me a Little is cut Sondheim songs. So it was one of the first sort of compilations, is that a word? That's a word.
Anthology?
Anthology. I didn't do it right. That's the usual. Anthology is good. And Craig Lucas had gone to Sondheim and said, can I put these things in some sort of storytelling form? And so that became Marry Me a Little. It's a 2-person show. What it is numbers that didn't work, but then they're all together. So that's not easy to make work, to tell you the truth. And things cut from Follies and a little night music and Saturday Night, and show things that just Forum, things that got replaced. So the early years.
Does it have the discarded love song from Forum?
It has Your Eyes Are Blue.
That's the one, I think. Yeah,
it has funny. That, and it has Bang from a little night music, and then it has other numbers that have become more iconic. But then at the time when it was written, not written but put together, it wasn't. Like trumpets. Also from Anyone Can Whistle, and there's stuff. There Won't Be Trumpets is in there, and All Things Bright and Beautiful. There's things that we now know very well. But so here they all are, and the very loose story that is told is you have these two single, can be done, traditionally it's done with a man and woman. I know it's been done with 2 men also as well. And probably with 2 women. I just haven't seen it. But anyway, traditionally, the way it was done originally was a man and a woman. They are home on a Saturday night, and they live in New York. Well, you're assuming it's New York. And they live on apartments on top of each other there. But really, they're inhabiting the same space. So your challenge is to move these actors around and have them do things but not acknowledge each other. And they're mostly solos until they look and see each other, and I do believe it's a song perform. Then and I might be wrong, you musical theater people, because I'm not looking at my script. Anyway, they see each other, they do a little fantasy section, and then they're back to solo.
But it's not a review per se, right? There's an attempt to weave this narrative around the songs.
Yeah, but nobody says, there's no speaking. It's just the songs.
Oh, interesting. So it is kind of like a review.
It's just songs. No dialogue, even when they acknowledge each other. It's just the Sondheim songs. The end. It is that Marry Me a Little. Well, Marry Me a Little is obviously in there as well. But that's just it. So this is probably the most challenging show I've ever done. We really dove into all Fringe all the time. And the show was an hour. I mean, it is an hour. We didn't cut anything. The show was an hour. And we had a set. All of our sets were things that obviously you could put up in 15 minutes and take down. And, that was always something we did. But this was very much so. We had a bed that was made especially for the actors. And 2 chairs, and then some hand props.
Did you try to, as director, did you feel a need to suggest a narrative tying the songs together, or were you happy to treat them as these individual moments of expression and work within them individually as self-contained stories?
Well, we think that the yearning and the longing that they both have is what ties that storytelling, and the fact that they're here and here in similar apartments having the same experience on the same Saturday night, of which we did set up in the beginning with little placards that said 2C, 2E, or whatever it was, which Corey held up as they came in. I always try to tell some form of story, but I didn't put a big story on it. They all had, of course, there were backstories. In my head, she worked at Victoria's Secret because I have a friend in New York, Stephanie, are you listening? Who's a friend of Dominic and I, and another one of her friends, Michael Wallet. We did Summer Stock, and Stephanie I don't know, somehow I thought of her because she's in management and she works at corporations. Victoria's Secret is one of the places she's worked. So she works in New York. So somehow that came to mind. And so we sort of, created that. And then we created his at Brookstone. So they both were sort of in retail. I don't know. It just came to my head. That was the backstory we started with. And we also had props that they both used. We had a computer. We had a Mac computer. We had an iPhone. And then they had some individual props that they didn't. Oh, they had a book that they shared when they did Fairy Tale. And then they had a picture that they looked at. So there were things I was showing, I think, that we can have the same experiences in life, male, female, and it was done very, very sparsely. Because it is for me to it's not for me to be flashy. oh, I can do this, I can do that. It is for the music and the performers actors to have the stage and to create all that. And it's for me, I really, really like it when audience members come up to me after seeing something like Mary Little said, they're so talented. And they are. Oh, these two performers are unbelievably crazy talented. And they were a couple. They still are a couple. They're married. They weren't married at the time, but they were together, They also did Baby With Me, and then David, the gentleman, did a show with me when he was in high school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you went back quite a way.
Yeah. And then Jesse did Baby With Me, and then we brought in David at one point. And so it was just a joy to work with them because they are beyond talented. I mean, if you're going to do Marry Me a Little, you better have people in mind to do it, because the songs are so hard to sing. They're so hard. Those Sondheim songs, they're so hard. Anyway, all this being said, it's people come up to me and say they're so talented. They come up with such funny things. They do, and I do too, and we give them and whatever. But I like it when people put it on the actors, or when it feels so natural that, of course, the actors created it. Then I did my job. Then I stepped out, and created the world for them to inhabit. And I don't need somebody to say, wow, that direction was great. In Fringe, I would suggest that Marry Me a Little was like the art piece that dropped down into Fringe, because I do think people came to see it and it was like, what are we watching? What is this?
Is there enough coherence between the songs that they sound like they can be coming from the same people in a natural way?
We I think, made them personal. I mean, those actors are tremendous. And they work together tremendously. And then Corey, crazy, talented, brilliant Corey Hirsch, who is playing for them, he works with them to make it personal too. He doesn't just, as we would know, doesn't just say, here are your notes. I mean, I think that's the trick, right? As you're saying, is it universal yet intimate and personal at the same time? And I think that it was, but I think the numbers are hard. Because we have to remember, they're cut numbers. So already they're numbers that didn't work. Are they bad numbers? They're not bad numbers. They just found, created better numbers that worked for those moments. So you've got all these numbers from all these different shows that have different tones and different feels. And there they all are, stuck one after another. Holy heck.
So it seems like that's the real challenge of the piece, is to try to create or imply continuity.
That's it. And we did. I mean, I hope we did. I think we did. We came in, there was sort of like, there was that whole thing that we do, checking the phone and checking the internet and, why, did someone stand them up or did someone cancel or we don't exactly know the story they're telling, which is fine. We can create our own story from them checking. We've all checked our phone. Has anybody answered yet? That thing, or maybe I'll check my email and see if something's happened here. Okay, and then we resort. The feel was we didn't expect to be home this Saturday night. We didn't expect to be home, but we're home. So what do we do with this Saturday night that we're home?
I imagine we're reflecting on why we're home on Saturday night.
So we're reading a book, something that we hardly ever do. We're looking at a book, which those of us who adore books but find it difficult to spend time with them these days, we do that. We reflect on a picture. Again, we don't know exactly what the picture is, but with where it's at, it feels like it's a relationship type of thing. they reflect on other times. There's the Girls of Summer. They sort of leave and then they get out of their work clothes. And in this we have the Kidnapped Boy Foxtrot, which is now of course very famous, but at the time wasn't, and that is hilarity that she sings that. And so they do have a change of costume when they kind of get more cozy. And they're both working the bed at different times, and they're both up and down and sitting, and we only have the bed and 2 chairs. That's all you got.
Now, if you'd showed me the names of the 3 shows we've discussed so far and asked me to guess what your 4th was, I would not have come up with Toxic Avenger. So how did you come upon this particular show, and what motivated you to choose that?
Well, one of my actors was in New York, and she had seen it, and she said, you should go see if you can grab a ticket to this Toxic Avenger show. And I'm like, oh, okay, what's it about? Oh, that B movie and da-da-da. And I'm like, vaguely. This is me, vaguely. Okay, so I grabbed a ticket and just laughed so hard and just thought it was so funny. But I never really thought so much of doing it. And then, again, it hadn't been done here. So we like to do things that have not been done. So we're like, well, it hasn't been done, so we better jump on that. Let's try that. And we knew it would be really fun musically for Corey, because all that 80s power ballady stuff, and I'm like, okay, let's try that. Let's try the Toxic Avenger moment. So, we just sort of just try stuff, we just sort of jump in and, it's not like I know it all that. I mean, I knew the Fantastics very well. I knew the music in A Man of No Importance and the story. Marry Me a Little, I had seen once, but I didn't know it, like to know it intimately. I knew several of the songs. Some songs I didn't know. But I just got the rights and said, let's just do it. So I wouldn't say that I knew the Toxic Avenger, brilliantly when we started. But, again, we used Shirley Hatton, who was the sister in A Man of No Importance. And then she came back to play the mayor and the mother part. Hilarious woman. And so we just sort of jumped in and thought it would be a fun change of pace. And I always think I've never met a musical I can't do, so let's just do it. Let's just have fun.
And I saw the show in Edinburgh a year or 2 ago,
yeah.
And I thought it was hysterical. I will say this in an opaque way, so not to spoil anything for people who haven't seen it, but I'll ask you a question that will make sense to anyone who has seen it. There is particularly creative use of doubling in a spirited combat scene late in the show. And I'm curious if that is canon or if that's something that maybe was part of just the production I saw.
No, they have that. They have that.
I'm glad to hear that, because that was really such a fun moment.
Yeah,
and
so hilarious.
I won't go into any more. Anyone listening who doesn't know what we're talking about will have to see the show in some form. But it seems like you have a lot of variety going on, in that you've done a serious drama and then a more mythological drama, in a way, with some dark comedic elements, to a collection of pieces that I'm guessing were presented as contemporary love ballads. I'm sure there was some comedic moments as well. But all of these are kind of rooted in drama in some way. There's a dramatic core to them. And then all of a sudden, you have something that is a show that is sincere, that does have honest-to-goodness character arcs, but is also zany at the same time. So it seems like there's a huge amount of stylistic range across these 4 productions.
Indeed. Yeah. I just like to try different things. And the music motivates me to, again, the music informs me, as it does any director, and because I'm a choreographer as well, it's helpful. So, I just kind of put all the pieces together. It's not, well, I always say it's kind of like a math thing. You got the music here, and you've got the choreography that needs to look like this. You've got the character story that this equals that, and there it is. And it just spits it out, and it's going to look like that. And I've done a lot of comedy stuff. I've done Forum a couple times, and there's nothing better than Forum. And I get the fast. Fast is important, and pace is important, and don't land on the jokes, please. Thank you.
Is there anything coming up for Good People Theater Company, or anything you'd like to do in the future?
Oh, there's so many things I'd like to do. I'm spending my time teaching right now. I spend a lot of time with it, and I also direct as part of my teaching load. So Good People has had to take a little bit of a back seat, but hopefully, once I have that together, I love The Last Ship. So there we go, back with that.
The Sting musical.
Yeah, interested in that. Could really have some fun with that. Can't wait till it comes out. And Good People's we've also done Barrymore and Closer Than Ever, but not in the Fringe construct. So I'll tell you, Barrymore is just something I wish I could take, and if I had $1 million, I'd put it in New York in a second, because Gordon Goodman is Barrymore. I mean, he's just so brilliant. So I would love to do that as well. I'd love to further that. Now, of course, those are, Closer Than Ever is a review, as we know, Maltby Shire, which I adore them so much. And we did that in a piano store.
Interesting.
Yes. They had a little room, and we sort of did that. And when I was able to meet Maltby Shire when they were here, they're like, "You're the ones who did the show in the piano store." That's us. And that worked because Corey was able to play the 9.5-foot concert grand. So it's all about the concert grand for me, because that really became our set. And the stand-up bass, and then the 4 performers. So it was a lot of something packed in a really small, it was like a little recital room in a piano store. And then, so when the people came in, they were surrounded by beautiful pianos. The Hollywood piano over there in Burbank. It was sort of an interesting thing, but the piano, wow, that $100,000 piano. And I really wanted a piano for that piece and not a keyboard. Richard said, "Why'd you do that in a piano store?" I said, "Because I wanted that piano. I wanted those tunes on that piano." He said, "That was a good choice." I said, "Yeah, that's a good choice."
It's a logical place to go.
Because
they've got pianos in stock.
I'm like, where am I going to find a piano? Not many small theaters have. There's a couple of them that have, smaller, most of them have an upright running around. But anyway, so we'll see what happens with Good People. I have all my stuff. We're all ready to go. I have kept all my stuff. And, we'll see. Good People, that's why we're called Good People. Good people can travel. So,
I like that. It's a nice spin on it.
Yeah.
Well, Janet, this has been a real pleasure. Having enjoyed your shows for several years, it was nice to actually get to meet one of the people behind them.
Thank you.
Is there somewhere online you would like to which you would like to send our listeners, gotta watch my prepositions, if they'd like to learn a little bit more about Good People or what you're doing in the future? Is there a social media presence you'd like to let people know about?
Well, we have a web page. You can just punch in goodpeopletheater.org, and I have my own webpage, janetmiller.net, and other than that, hit me up on Facebook. I'm happy to tell anybody what we're up to, and we're always up to something.
Well, thank you again for taking the time to come back, and I will look forward to your next production, whether that's Fringe or elsewhere.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We have a third, no less exciting Hollywood Fringe interview that has been recorded with Laura Wiley. However, this episode has gotten so long, it's actually going to bust the server quota for Musical Talk's publication system. So we're going to have to split this into a two-parter, so stay tuned till next week. I don't really know what stay tuned means in the podcast era, but roll with me here. Stay tuned till next week. We're going to run the third of our 3-interview series on the Hollywood Fringe, and you'll get to hear all about Laura Wiley and her very clever, pop-culturally based original musicals. Until then, for Musical Talk, this is Mike Shapiro signing off.
For more information about Musical Talk, please visit our website at musicaltalk.co.uk. You can email us at feedback@musicaltalk.co.uk, listen to past episodes on iTunes and YouTube, and follow our social media channels on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.